well, I can't believe I'm making this video again, but I'm seeing crazier and crazier marketing that drives me up the wall. Um, a common conversation I'll have on a day-to-day basis is, can you tune my blank ECU? Stop buying stuff before talking to your prospective tuners. Like, I can't explain how bad some of these softwares are, so I'm going to. In visual representation, which might grasp the concept of how bad these are. Marketing is a hell of a tool because this is not a comparable platform. Now, personally, I'm a dealer for one of these I'm about to show you. It doesn't belong in these cars. It can rev nice, it can drive nice. Your fuel economy is going to be total shit. The accuracy of the fuel model is requiring constant O2 correction, regardless of how perfect you've calibrated it for day 1, day 2, day 3. There's no elevation compensation with barometrics. They're just constantly requiring a closed loop correction. And the fuel model is so basic that you might not be able to tell it's shit. So let's say you had a compensation of coolant temperature, air temperature. You run a wastegate pressure sensor, so it's actually compensating based on a CO2 system for your boost control. It's still going to be inconsistent on a day-to-day basis, regardless of what you do. When you throw in drive-by-wire or all these other controls, I've seen EGT compensations barely do anything. Like, the fuel model is so basic and so flawed that it's a true problem. So, you as a consumer should be talking to an advisor before you purchase things. That's how we can figure out what you actually need before you waste money on getting the wrong thing and then making it an incredibly big headache for whoever you're working with. So, this is my public service announcement for that, right? Like, let's say you have a turbo and you're like, I bought this turbo, it's gonna be great. And I'm like, you can't make your power goal with that. It's either gonna be too laggy or way too small or overheat because what you're trying to do is constantly be on the limiter, and it's oiled only with journal bearing, and even though it's the most robust turbo known to man, you just hot start on the limiter, never let it cool down, and all your heat exchangers are undersized. So what happens? The turbo shaft bends. You guys need to talk to your advisor, whether it be me or whoever, about what to get for products, because this is insane what I've been seeing and dealing with. Let me show you what I mean. All right. This, back 2017, 2018, I wrote a comparison on MTune software, and then I did a comparison of all these other ECUs on ARG7 Club. Most of this stands up to today. Let me explain what I'm talking about. So, Platinum Sport. This is a fantastic ECU. Fuel model is basic in a millisecond form for the injector control. The injector data is very simple with dead time, and your staging is done with a step here. It's funny because this mapping is a factory map from them, and I would totally not run this on a car. You'd want this to be a shorter interval, not a full PSI. But essentially the primary is this injector. Then you have a disenrichment period, which I'll explain right here. Primary hold kicks off, turns off here. Oh, it's in kPa, so it's actually very close. So the second this thing gets into any kind of positive manifold pressure, this will kick on the secondaries, 200 millisecond delay period of where this gets subtracted by 200 milliseconds of injection time. And then this one kicks on. Then you stage up into your secondaries, and these will go up. And this is called a primary hold. Primary hold. Let's see if it showed it real quick. Hold the current pulse width. When the staging bar is exceeded, the secondary injectors then begin to fire. Yeah, the reason why I hate common mode is because they go to the same pulse width. So if your injector, it ends up being a total disaster. But so Platinum Sport, anyways, staying on topic, Platinum Sport works great. It is a very basic model of fuel injection and injected dead time. And you'd think to yourself, okay, cool, this was made 25 years ago. Well, you know, I don't want to start off with this, but I might as well. Haltech, look at that. Same exact styling. Primary, secondary. Okay? And all this has is your battery voltage compensation for your injector, which if you're at a 14 volt system, this will be 0, and then these are offsets from this 0 point. So, you know, very basic fuel system. Why is this currently being touted as a competition use modern ECU when it is not? This is something that you would be comparing to a Platinum Sport, which, oddly enough, the Platinum Sport runs these cars, in my experience, better than this does. So, kind of weird. But again, you're getting a very basic configuration here of what I would consider a 25-year-old ECU being sold today. And I think for the price point of this, you guys are absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. You know, you're getting a Platinum Sport style ECU for way too much money. And realistically, what I've seen people spend on Microtech and Haltech, you could be getting yourself into an M-Tron or a Motec, which is like, why in the fuck would you do that? These, oh geez, get this piece of shit out of the way. These two are fantastic top of the line softwares. Okay. This has on M1 build, you can do anything you want as far as programming. It's the sky's the limit. You know, it's really fully open-ended. The M-Tron, you can do stuff like, and I've got all these videos in specifics breaking down each one of these programs. This is just a quick overview. You can do something like a custom user control. Like this one is change in RPM trigger. You're setting conditions, and then you're setting how to control said conditions, and then these can stack on top of each other. So if you've got another one, you're saying, I also want to have this set up for pedal position, idle air, and engine cycle events, and there's something else that also stacks on top of another feature to enable a third feature. So if we go back to what I think is the most oversold, overpromised, underdelivered ECU, Adaptronic, we can go through and say, like, this thing you couldn't customize your axes at all. You're only stuck as map and RPM. Your fuel modeling and stuff, the way that you would get injection to work properly, or all your configurations on here, even though the workflow is what I think is fantastic, you're overall getting a very limited ECU. And, something like this Motec, you're not having that problem. And like a modern Haltech, you're not having that problem. So I can take this right here. If I wanted to change this axis into something else, I can change what my axis is in total. And then I can also have, instead of just a 3D map like this, I can have a 4D map and add another axis like this. So let's say we've got fuel composition. And then now down here, I've got a map. Just put, and you'll see these values change, right? So this is a modern ECU. This has actual engine controls. This has actual engine protections that work. It has proper feedback to the tuner. So does this link. I am not a huge fan of Link, but you know what? This thing overall has a very good fuel model. I can go through, and I wouldn't use traditional, but I would go through here and I would say I want a modeled multi-fuel, and I'd have my injection properties in here, and I would actually go through and correct all this stuff for the conditions and the altitude and everything that the car is at. I can have barometric compensation. I can have all sorts of stuff when it comes to real injected data. And I can get this thing to run significantly better, again, than what is being touted as a modern ECU, even though it's clearly not. This is, to me, a 25-year-old ECU that's being marketed far beyond what I think the price point is valued at. And the crazy thing is, the marketing will make people buy every single little additional piece for it. Input expanders, injector drivers, multiple nanos for their wideband. And it's like, dude, you just have a basic build. You could have put a damn Holley carburetor sniper series on here and been fine. But no, you spent $4,500 on this ECU that has the control of something that was 25 years old. So I don't understand who in the fuck you talk to, but you need to slap him upside the head and get your money back. Now, is it bad? No. It's just a little bit less control than what I would prefer. And for that price point, an Mtron is still like $3,200. Hilariously, this is cheaper than a Haltech setup. And this has infinitely more control. It's just not the easiest thing to work with. This is something that is what I would consider a true motorsport grade ECU. I explained this in depth when I did a comparison. And this thing is just, every single thing is feed forward. So without getting too over the top, feed forward is like a lookup table for the throttle position, or like a 3-port wastegate, or, which by the way, this has integrated dead time configurations for 3-port wastegate. But a feed forward is something that the ECU is referencing as a lookup table. So if you think of, whoever used Adaptronic, you had a predicted map. So at a given throttle position and a given RPM, it would look up what the map pressure would be when you go to accelerate and enrich at that position. So let's say 3,500 RPM, 30% throttle, you're going to make, let's say, 5 inches of mercury for vacuum. That lookup table is technically a feed forward. And imagine this ECU has those style of tables on literally everything. So when it comes to the actual tuning, you're dropping in reference values that you're finding during the tuning phase, and it makes it like incredibly over the top accurate. There's a video on YouTube that's by Lightspeed tuning or something like that. It's a 2-minute video, and it shows the self-learning speed for auto lambda control on an Mtron. And it's like, I've never ever seen an ECU be as accurate. We're talking 0.002 of a lambda, and it's getting this correction in like 5 seconds on a steady state dyno, holding it, adding throttle modulation, and it's changing cell by cell within 0.2 lambda, and the whole sweep is done within like 15 seconds. What? And then you have this basic bullshit that's costing more than that you're putting in a value, perfectly tuned, awesome. Temps are exactly the same day to day. Altitude exactly the same day to day. Okay, it's off by 12%. 12%? And then you've got its competition off by 0.2 lambda? We're not even in the same fucking realm. Anyways, talk to your tuner. Talk to your advisor about, engine building, turbo sizing, ECU selection. Things are getting out of hand with marketing and salesmen and the bullshit they push on you. You need to talk to someone about the specifics of what you're doing with your vehicle. Are you drifting? Are you taking it on the road course? Are you doing high performance driving events or 24-hour endurance races? Or is it your Canyon car, or do you use it for daily commuting? There's a million different things you could be using your car for. And based on your location, the roads you like to drive, stuff like that, all of this changes. And on my personal right brain design questionnaire thing, I ask you, what do you think your upkeep maintenance skills are? Because that's become a very apparent drawback in this community. I'll see stuff that like, oh, my car's doing this after it was tuned. Have you changed your spark plugs this year? No? They're the same ones from when we dynoed that one time. Again, these cars do not have a clean, fresh air combustion event at any given time. Spark plugs are, throw them the fuck away every oil change. If you've got race plugs, maybe every 3 oil changes. But that sure as shit is not going to last you a year. If you're driving your car, it's not going to last you. Unless we do what I would say is a depowered, lean, almost lean burn style mapping, which works out phenomenal. I'm not sure if you guys ever hear the difference, but the crispness of a car that's not using fuel so much as the cooling factor. So if I can take a bunch of timing out of it, lean it out, and give it back to you that way, your plugs will last a lot longer. And that's essentially what OEM did. So if you ever look at their fuel ratio targets from a factory ECU, you'll be like, we can't run those on a rotary, that's not going to survive. Meanwhile, those motors never had problems. So, learn from the manufacturers. They know better. They spent millions and millions and millions to figure that out. Especially when I personally know a facility with 2 dyno cells that goes through $1 million a month on sensors. Let that sink in. So what do you think the OEMs did to R&D at their motor? And you're thinking that Joe Blow down the street with his little carbureted 6-port can figure it out better than you can because he's always done it this way. No. Listen to manufacturers. Make it to where the motor is happy, not what you think is going to work. Because it's never what you think, ever. You feed it what it wants, period. So I'm going to go through in the next set of videos and kind of dig deep again, make you guys think. But it pissed me off when I saw more and more of these fuel techs being installed in these cars. I'm like, you realize we can't do that sort of control. Oh, it's a daily driver. Great. Well, throw your fuel economy away, because we can make it chop, we can make it idle, we can make it rip, but it's not going to do what other ECUs can do when it comes to actual controls. It'll be inaccurate. It'll rely on the O2 compensation, and that's fine. It's actually a very good O2 controller. But is the fuel model accurate day to day? No. And as long as you understand that, and as long as you understand those sacrifices to get that ECU working perfectly, then we're good. No problem. I'll tune it. I'm happy to tune it. Because I'll tell you what, they do wake up, they do ground shake, they do like a great job controlling the engine from outside of cruise. When you're on the throttle, no problem. So I'm kind of set in my ways. I'm kind of spoiled because I went through and did all this stuff in detail. And what I mean by that is the creation of my own maps from every single manufacturer. And I found the values in depth as far as this ECU is good here. This one has a bad workflow but has all the control in the world. That's this one. Some of them just, I can seek out the problem instantaneously. Like on a Haltech, I can inherently find an issue in moments. So my workflow speed in a Haltech is significantly faster than any other ECU right now. Adaptronic is at that same level, but please don't run those. They're just piles of shit. Don't do it. And, ECU Master's really stepping up. So that software has a lot more control than a lot of the alternatives. And I didn't show it today, but I explained it in my little briefing way back when, about 5 years ago. And it's just going to come down to talking again to your tuner, your advisor, sizing a setup for your needs, a fuel system, a turbo, an ECU that actually makes sense. And don't be sold on shit. They will explain to you, or I will explain to you, whatever it is that you need to get to your goals. And then we're going to talk about future proofing and if there's something else that you want to do later on. Because some people will build themselves into a corner, and it's really sad to be like, hey man, we're out of options. You can do this, but that's not what I would want for you. So I hate doing it. I hate explaining that to people because, at the end of the day, this is a pay-to-play industry. So kind of sucks. But yeah, I'm not advising fuel tech.